All right, we're on 19b, Testament days. So we established yesterday, it's a good one, understanding the view of Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah, and along with that came Rabbi Akiva. Perhaps we'll see later today actually a difference between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva. But essentially they both agree that what should happen is first the meal offering offered by the Sotah, followed by her drinking the water. They both agree with that. The Tana Kama, the original sage of our Mishnah, we didn't talk about yesterday, but the original sage of our Mishnah said the reverse: first drink, and then offering. And what it comes down to, what we learned yesterday is as follows. There's 3 times the Torah says to give her to drink. Once it says just before the offering, description of the offering, after the description of the vow and the description of erasing God's name, it says she shall drink, right? That's in verse 26. That's in verse 26. No, 24 is the first one, which says, and he should give her a drink. Then in the end, then in 25 and 26, it describes the meal offering. At the end of 26, it says, quote, and after he shall give her to drink. And then the third time in the beginning of 27, he should give her to drink. So Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva said like this, the verse states, and after he shall give her a drink. So clearly, or let's, actually not that way, clearly that's the primary. Yeah, clearly that's the primary, because it says twice after the offering that she shall drink. That's clearly the primary. As for the fact that it says, and she shall drink beforehand, so Rabbi Akiva told us, oh, look, if she's supposed to be drinking after the offering, that means the writing of and the erasing of God's name should also be after the offering, because you want to delay the erasing to the last moment. Because once it's erased, she has to drink, no backing out. So we try to delay it as long as possible. So the Torah comes and tells us, says Rabbi Akiva, even though they're supposed to erase the name of God after the offering, because in my opinion and Rabbi Shimon's opinion, the drinking comes after the offering, and therefore the erasing should also be after the offering. If they didn't follow the instructions and they erased early, we still force her to drink, even though they broke the rule. And that's why the Torah adds that instruction before the offering, and he gives her a drink. For that anomaly of a case where if they made a mistake and erased it early. Yeah. Then Rabbi Shimon came along and said, added another angle, and said the primary is, like Rabbi Akiva, that the drinking should be done after the offering, which is why the verse says in 27, he shall give her to drink. Now in 26, when the verse says, quote, and after he shall give her to drink, that word after is to teach you that there are 3 things that must be done before the drinking. Number 1, the offering has to be offered. Okay, that's his view. Number 2, the name of God has to be erased completely, not just, can't have any residue left in the paper. And number 3, she has to take the vow. The vow is obvious. Everybody agrees the vow has to come first, but the Mishnah said it anyway. Okay, so this is where we are now. So now that we know Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva's view, comes the Gemara and now discusses what's the view of the Tana Kama. What's the view of the sage, of the first sage of our Mishnah, who said that the drinking should be first, when seemingly there's a very strong argument to say that the drinking should be after, because 2 out of the 3 are actually written after. And the word, and after she shall drink, seems to imply to wait after. So why would the original sage of the Mishnah say drinking comes first and then offering? So this is where we are. It's about a little less than half the way down the page. The last 2 words on the line, Maikom Mifli. The line begins with the word Asa, and the end of that line, in the middle of the page, a little higher in the middle. 19b. little higher than halfway through the page. The line begins with the word asa, v'loy klum, kedi nasva, and then the last two words of the line is the ma'ikam mifli. Have it?
It's okay. I'll find it.
Here, gives me another shot.
I don't know if this is in the same order.
It is. The pages are the same setup. Here. There's the question mark there at the end of the line.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so but ma'ikam mifli, what is the root of their dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the sages? Rabbi Shimon, who says drinking after, and the sages, the Tanna Kama, the first scholar, the first sage, who says drinking first. So says the Gemara like this. Okay, we've already established that Tolosa Kroi Ksivi. There are 3 times the Torah says that he should give her to drink. 1, Vihishka Kama. There is and he shall give her to drink. That comes first, before the description of the offering. Number 2, it says at the end of verse 26, Ba'acher Yashka, after the Torah describes the offering, it says, and afterwards he shall give her to drink. That's number 2. And number 3, Vihishka Basar. There's the latter, and he shall give her to drink, which comes at the beginning of 27. Those are the 3 times. Once before the offering, twice after. The 2 that are after, one which the first says, and after he shall give her to drink, and then the next one says, and he shall give her to drink. So to have these 3. So Rabbanon Sabri, the sages, that is the Tanna Kama of our Mishnah, the original scholar of our Mishnah, they are of the view. Vihishka Kama, the first time the Torah says, and he shall give her to drink, lo gufay, that comes to teach us the actual order of events. Shemashka, that he gives her to drink, v'achakach makir es mechasa, and only afterwards does he offer the offering. And the sage's reasoning is very simple. The Torah, when the Torah begins, as we're going to see explicitly soon in the Gemara, when the Torah begins its instruction of how to do something, it starts off with how it should get done. That's the first thing it's going to tell you. If it's repeated later, then it must be teaching you some law. But the original law comes first. The Torah is not going to tell you some instruction that's an anomaly, it's a sidestep case, and only later tell you what's the first case scenario, what you should be doing. So the first instruction you arrive at, that's the primary instruction. So the first time the Torah says, and he shall give her a drink, that's when you should do it, before the description of the offering. As for the fact that the Torah says twice later, again, he shall drink, okay, so we have to think about what the Torah is teaching us. But the first instruction you reach, that's the primary instruction. Straightforward. And therefore, if that's the one that comes first, then that's what happens first. Now, as for the fact that the Torah says twice after the description of the offering, and he shall give her a drink, so those 2 things are coming to teach us specific laws. Namely, following?
Yeah.
So when it says Ba'achar Yashka, when the Torah says in the end of verse 26, after the description of the offering, it says, and afterwards he shall give her a drink, end quote, say the sages, Miboyle, this is required to teach us a specific law, namely, L'sheri shumoy nikar, to teach us that the ink has to be completely erased. So when it says, and after he shall give her a drink, it doesn't mean, and after the offering he shall give her a drink. Because I already told you, the verse is saying, according to the sages, I already told you the drinking happens before the offering. So when I say, and after he shall give her a drink, take those words and apply it to that which I told you earlier. Namely, the drinking I told you earlier should be done after that which I told you before that, which was the erasing. So make sure that the ink is completely erased. So the word and after doesn't mean and after the offering I just told you about, but it's a further description of the original drinking I told you earlier. The original drinking, which I told you before, comes before the offering. Add the word after to that. And that should be completely after the erasing, which was described even before that. Following? Okay. So in other words, you have the primary instruction at the beginning, and anything that follows are just added details to that original instruction. So when later it says, and after she shall drink, that after has to be applied to what happens before the offering.
After what?
After what? So if you read the verse simply, it means after the offering. But because we know from earlier that the drinking got to be before the offering, so the word and after has to come from things that happened before the offering, namely the erasing. And it has to be completely after the erasing and no residue left in the paper. Okay. And likewise, the Hishka Basra, the second time the Torah says, and he shall drink, he shall give her a drink, the beginning of verse 27, which is the second time that comes after the offering, the third time. This comes to teach you, that if the scroll was erased, the scroll was erased, and she says, drinking. We compel her, and she drinks against her will. Okay, so the first instruction, so this is a simple 3-step in the sages. The first one comes to tell you, well, this is what happens. It's the first one. This is what you got to do. Always the first instruction is the primary in the sage's view. The second one, which says, and after she shall drink, is not applied to where it's stated in the verse, but it's applied to the original instruction earlier. And thus, the instruction I told you before, which happens before the offering, is to be done after everything that's said earlier, which is the complete full erasing that there shouldn't be any residue. And then the final and third, and she shall drink, is to teach you that under certain circumstances, if the thing has been erased, as you were instructed to do, and now she says, I don't want to do it, too late, it's been erased, we force her to drink. This is the sages. Clear? Okay. Now comes Rabbi Shimon. So now let's go back to Rabbi Shimon, and let's see how he explains all the 3 verses. Rabbi Shimon's of the view.
So that he's now going to reply to that.
So he's going to give a different reading to the 3 verses.
Oh, okay.
Va'acher yashka, the instruction number 2, the second time the Torah says to give her to drink, which comes at the end of verse 26, right after the Torah describes the offering. And there it says, and after he shall give her to drink. Says Rabbi Shimon, lagufay, that comes to teach you the actual law. Shemakives minchasa, that first comes the offering, but achakach mashkin, only afterwards he gives her to drink. So Rabbi Shimon's logic is like this. We have to take this one, number 2, as the primary instruction, because it has the words and after. And if you look at the actual words and after, it flows from the words before that describes the offering. He doesn't like this idea of taking 2 words, which are explicitly stating and after, and apply it to something earlier, which is what the sages did. So he doesn't like that. So you can think that like the sages and Rabbi Yehuda are thinking about, let's look at the literal translation versus the flow. The sages say, look at the flow of the text. And the flow of the text is the first thing it says is to drink. Okay, so that's the first thing, that's the instruction. Whereas the Rabbi Shimon says, well, look at the actual words. Where does the Torah speak explicitly? In the words, and after she shall drink. That's very explicit. And after the thing I just told you, which is the offering. Whereas the sages say, no, if you do that, then the first instruction to drink doesn't belong there. And you're reading the text and it flows and you're being told something that's not true right at the beginning.
It seems like they both have
exactly, they're very valid arguments, which is why the Torah is written that way. Hashem wants that there should be opinions and back and forth. So Hashem writes it in such a way that each side has valid ways of thinking. Precisely. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon says the words and after she shall drink are so explicit that must be the exact meaning. That first they offer her offering, and only afterwards, mashke does he give her a drink. Because it says there and after. That's too explicit to ignore. So that's got to be the right order. Okay. Now, if that's the case, the reader has to go back to the original Vihishka Kama. The reader now has to go back to the original time it said to instruct it to drink, which came before the offering, and ask himself, what are you teaching me now? If in the second time you told me to drink, that's the explicit statement, drink after.
Just
So I got to go, that's right.
the sages did.
Exactly. So I got to go back to the original one and say, well, what did you mean then if you told me to drink before? So this says the Gemara, Shem Hishka, if he gave her a drink, and afterwards he did the offering. So Rabbi Shimon says that the primary is offering and then drink. But if you reverse the order, what did Rabbi Shimon say in the Mishnah, and you accidentally gave her a drink before the offering, he said, Ksheda, it's kosher. Why did he say that? He says that because the Torah does put the instruction to drink before the offering. So in other words, Rabbi Shimon is saying like this. There's 2 instructions. Let's put the third one aside for a second. There's 2 instructions, one before the offering, one after the offering. Which means both are valid, obviously. But which one's the primary? So says Rabbi Shimon, look at the text, that's explicit. The one that says that after she shall drink, that's the primary. But it adds the other one to say that would also work if you did it that way. Following?
Yeah, that's how he explains what you're learning from the first
Correct.
drinking.
That's right.
He says, okay, yeah, that's a true point. So if she did it, even though it's not the best way to do it, because
It's still
it doesn't
valid.
have the exact wording, it's still valid.
That's
because
right.
It is the first.
That's right.
It could be a primary.
That's right. So you have one before, one after to teach you that both are okay. And the second one, the one that's after, is more explicit, stating the word and after to tell you that this is the primary way to do it. It's a clever way of thinking. Now here, Rashi points out, is Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Kiva disagree. Rabbi Kiva yesterday, what did he tell us is the first Vihishka for? The first, and she shall drink, to teach you that if accidentally they erase the ink before they force it to drink. That was his reasoning for the original Vihishka. Rabbi Shimon doesn't say that. Rabbi Shimon says that the first, and he shall drink, is to teach you that if they accidentally reverse the order, it's kosher. Which means, according to Rabbi Kiva, if they accidentally reverse the order, it would not be kosher. Because that verse, which Rabbi Shimon uses to tell you that if they accidentally reverse the order, it's kosher, Rabbi Kiva used it for a different law.
That's interesting. It seems like Rabbi Kiva is more against the Tanna Kama than
Exactly.
Rabbi Shimon, even though the arguments really.
Exactly. Right. So there are three opinions then. Tanna Kama says it must be before.
Right.
Rabbi Shimon says either way, but primarily after. And Rabbi Kiva says, I'm sorry, only after.
He's more strict.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so now we still have to go to Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so we have two out of the three down. The first instruction, and she shall drink, according to Rabbi Shimon, is to teach you that it's okay, even though it's not the best. The second one, which says, and afterwards she shall drink, which is the explicit statement, that's to tell you this is the prime way to do it. Now, Behishka Basra, the third one, the last time the Torah says, and she shall drink, at the beginning of verse 27, what does that teach you? That if it was erased, if the ink was erased, Amran, she says, I don't want to drink. She's backing out. We compel her, and we make her drink against her will. So the last Behishka, the last instruction, and she shall drink. Both Rabbi Shimon and the sages agree that that's there to teach you that we compel her once it's erased. The question is the first two. According to the sages, read it straight. The first one says, let her drink. That's the primary. It says afterwards, and after she shall drink, apply that to what we said earlier. And therefore the drinking must be done after the erasing, complete erasing. Rabbi Shimon says, no, the third one teaches you, like the sages, that once it's erased, we compel her to drink. The first one teaches you, and the second one teaches you that it's okay to be either way. Now, which one of them is primary? The one that's more explicit in stating, and after she shall drink.
Yeah,
And that word, and after she shall drink, teaches you actually two things, according to Rabbi Shimon. Number one, that it should be after the offering in primary, in first case scenario, and B, it should be after the complete erasing. So Rabbi Shimon says, read the words literally. The Torah says erase, then it says offering, and then it says after she shall drink. Okay, the after she shall drink is after the offering and after complete erasing. Whereas the original one that says, and she shall drink before the offering, that's to tell you that if it's by accident, you did it the other way, it's still okay. Which Rabbi Kiva says, no. That original, and after she shall drink, the original, and she shall drink, Rabbi Kiva says, is there that if they accidentally erased it too early, we force her to drink anyway. But if you accidentally gave her a drink before, it's invalid. Clear?
Can you repeat that last part? The first drinking by Rabbi Akiva.
So Rabbi Akiva says, you must do drinking after offering. And the fact that the Torah has the word, and afterwards she shall drink before the offering, that's only there to tell you that if you accidentally erased it before the offering, we still give her to drink. But not that she should actually drink before the offering. That's not allowed. It must be done after. That's the way Rashi explains it for us. I just want to make sure I got that right. Look at Rashi again. Yep, that's correct. Okay. So final words from the Gemara, then we'll continue the rest tomorrow. Sorry?
Who of those three sages are more competent?
Okay, I'm not going to, God forbid, say who's most competent. They're all equally competent, but the halacha follows the original sages. And the reason is because it's a plural. The Gemara refers to the Tanna Kama, the original scholar of a Mishnah, as a plural, which means Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shimon are in the minority here. Not that they're less competent, God forbid, their opinions are equally valid. As we see, they have perfectly logical ways of reading this verse, but the Torah itself prescribes that we follow the majority in case of
But sometimes it
different
says,
readings.
doesn't it, in the Gemara that when there's argument between these two particular sages, the halakha always follows one particular.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. So
I don't know.
there are certain rules about who's arguing with who and who,
Yeah.
but they're all based on rules such as some of them are based on rules of like, who is more intelligent. But most of the time they're actually based on rules. There's different rules. One, the most primary of them is you follow the majority.
Yeah.
You follow the majority. That's Torah says that explicitly. Is follow the majority, right? So the majority is definitely what wins the day. But often the case is who is most recent. Explain what I mean. If in generation A there's a dispute, and then in generation B someone takes a certain side, that means during a time of Torah study between generation A and generation B, the consensus became like B. And that's why the latter will get the ruling in his favor, because he's taken into consideration the previous generation's arguments, plus all the discussion that's come to his point, right? So but then what happens is once a generation comes to a conclusion based on any of the rules, the next generation doesn't begin by arguing against the previous generation, but they begin by taking the previous generation as axiom and then working from there. So once the Mishnah draws a conclusion based on all the different rules, the Gemara will only work with the Mishnah's conclusion. But when you're looking at the Mishnah itself, you see who's first, who's last. And whoever's last obviously took into consideration the opinions of the previous and still came to the conclusion this way, which means that was the consensus of their time. So there's all kinds of rules like that that inform us how to follow. And in this case specifically, it seems that we're following the sages because they're the majority. Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shimon are in the minority here. They're two lone sages speaking alone, whereas the Tanakama, the original one, is speaking on behalf of everybody, it seems. And also, I think because Rabbi Akiva is the single voice which says that if you accidentally did the drinking first, it wouldn't work. Whereas Rabbi Shimon, who says that you should, in first case scenario, do drinking after the offering, he said that if you accidentally did the drinking before, you're still okay. Which means if you follow the sages who said to drink drinking first, you're still okay according to Rabbi Shimon, who says you shouldn't do it that way to begin with. Right? So you cover more ground, you cover more opinions by following the sages. You cover 2 out of 3, right? Following? Even if in Rabbi Shimon's view, you're only doing it in second case, but you're still doing it kosher, even according to Rabbi Shimon. So by doing it first, by doing the drinking first, and then the offering, you actually cover 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
Right. That's correct. Yeah.
They just different reasoning.
That's correct.
Why they're doing it, but it's still
That's right. Rabbi Shimon says you're doing it in second best case, and the sages are saying you're doing first case, but they both agree it's kosher, right?
Yeah, they call it like after the fact.
The dievit. So let's see now exactly. So the Gemara is going to make the final comment, which is what I based our original explanation on. The Rabbanan and the sages, the reason why they take the first instruction, and she shall drink, which comes before the description of the offering. The reason why they take that one as the primary is what I told you earlier based on this line. The Eved like Pasachra, the Torah wouldn't open up with a after the fact scenario. According to the Rabbi Shimon, the primary instruction comes after the offering and after she shall drink, which means when you're reading the text and the Torah says, and she shall drink, and then it describes the offering, the first time it says, and she shall drink, is actually not telling you what to do. It's telling you what you did in case of mistake. That's still kosher. So the sages just say, why would the Torah open up with a description of what happens when you do a mistake? First, the Torah should talk about what you should do, and then tell you, well, if you made a mistake, you're still okay. But according to Rabbi Shimon, when you read the text, the first thing you read is if you made a mistake. And only afterwards you get the instruction you should be doing in the first case scenario. Which is why the sages prefer to read the text as the first instruction you get. That's the primary. And everything else is there to teach you details and whatever. Because in Rabbi Shimon's reading, the first text you read is actually only that it's okay if you do it this way, but you shouldn't really. So the first text you read, and she shall drink, is actually, well, you shouldn't really do this, but you should drink. The sages don't like that. They don't like that line of reasoning. They'd rather have, when you read it, the flow should be clear. But the first thing
you don't start off by saying what happens if there's a mistake.
Correct. Don't start, exactly. You don't begin by telling us what happens. That's right.
How it should be done.
Exactly. You don't begin by telling us what a mistake is.
Right. That doesn't flow logically.
That's right. So the first thing is instruction. And afterwards, other statements are there to teach you details and whatever. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, no, the words and after she shall drink, that's explicit. And okay, so what? So the first thing you're reading is what happens if it's a mistake. Okay.
You have to find some reason for.
So this is both. That's right. So these are the two ways of thinking. Okay. Tomorrow, God willing, you get into more details about Rabbi Kiva's view Okay, wonderful day, everybody. As the Rabbi mentioned this morning, it's Chav Cheshvan, 20th of Cheshvan is the birthday of the 5th Chabad Rebbe. And in a very direct way, he impacted my life personally. Not because I met him. First of all, I learned from his teachings, but even more so, I learned in the yeshiva that he founded. He founded Talmud Sotah, the Chabad network of yeshivas, that it's the kind of yeshiva that educates the boys. As the Rabbi said, that the reason why he wants Talmud Sotah is more than the learning. He said, there's other places, it's not like he's the first yeshiva on the planet, there's other yeshivas where they learn. What he's looking for is neiros lahayr, candles that shine light. He's looking to get boys motivated to the point that they're willing to get out there and share and give and teach. That's what Talmud Sotah inculcates. It was founded before communism, and it's the students of that school that were on the front lines, ready to get killed, sent to jail, because they have to share Judaism under communist boots. That's the kind of boys he educated. And today, the Chabad boys all over the world are educated. They get that fire in Talmud Sotah, in their Shab's yeshiva. So
it's
a direct
planted all
over the world. I mean, today it's all over the world. Yeah. Initially it was in Russia, and then it moved to Warsaw and then to New York, but it's all over. It's all over Israel, New York, Russia. Here in Montreal, we have Talmud Sotah on Westbury.
What age was that school from?
So it's a post-high school, let's say. So from like
High school.
okay, so it started off with actually older boys, but as it went on, it became, let's say, I don't know, 15, 16 to marriage age. And now already, in some ways, the Talmud Sotah has been, the previous Rebbe extended the yeshiva to include children as well. So the yeshiva system of Lubavitch is called Talmud Sotah. If you go on Westbury, you'll see the big sign. It says in English, or it says in Hebrew, certainly, Talmud Sotah Lubavitch. Talmud Sotah means the supporters of those who are wholesome.
So they're also at Westbury.
On Westbury, yeah. That one was established by the previous Rebbe. But the original yeshiva was established by the Rabbi whose birthday we celebrate today. Okay, have a wonderful day, Yidden.